In the scorching motor pool at Fort Valor, a quiet civilian contractor was about to have her carefully constructed world shattered. What started as routine vehicle maintenance took a shocking turn when she came face to face with a four-star general who recognized something that should have been impossible. Samira El-Amin wasn't your typical mechanic. For 10 years, she had spent her life hiding in plain sight, known for her uncanny ability to fix anything that was broken, and her determination to remain invisible. When she encountered General Malcolm Stroud while wiping sweat from her forehead, she had no idea she was exposing the one piece of evidence that could destroy everything. Sam's rolled-up sleeve revealed a faded tattoo that would lead to questions she'd prayed would never come. What began as a simple transmission repair would become a reckoning with ghosts from Afghanistan. The military would never be the same after learning that one of their greatest heroes had been hiding among them all along, officially dead, but very much alive and fixing trucks in the Arizona desert. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the motor pool at Fort Valor, turning the concrete into a shimmering heat trap that could fry an egg in minutes. Samira El-Amin crouched beside a disabled Humvee, her weathered hands working methodically through the vehicle's transmission housing. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she traced the problem to a blown seal, a $30 part that had stranded a $50,000 vehicle. "Easy fix," she muttered to herself, reaching for her toolbox. At 34, Sam had developed the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to solve problems without fanfare. The other contractors barely acknowledged her presence, and that was exactly how she preferred it. Invisible, unremarkable, safe. The motor pool hummed with its usual afternoon rhythm until Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared at her elbow, clipboard in hand, and an expression that meant disruption. "El-Amin, we've got VIPs coming through in 20 minutes, he announced. "Need this area looking sharp." Sam glanced up, squinting against the glare. "How sharp are we talking?" "General Malcolm Stroud is touring the base, some bigwig from the Pentagon reviewing our readiness protocols." Rodriguez surveyed the scattered tools and parts around Sam's workspace. "Can you wrap this up and clear out?" "Give me 15 minutes, I'm almost done anyway." Rodriguez nodded and moved on to hassle the next contractor. Sam turned back to the Humvee, working faster now. She'd learned long ago that when brass came calling, it was best to be somewhere else entirely. Generals asked questions. Questions led to attention. Attention led to problems she couldn't afford. The replacement seal slid into place perfectly, and Sam was tightening the final bolts when she heard the approaching convoy. 3 black SUVs rolled through the motor pool gates, their tinted windows reflecting the harsh desert light. She kept her head down, focusing on her work as polished boots clicked across the pavement nearby. "Impressive response times, General," someone was saying. "Our maintenance crews have reduced vehicle downtime by 18% this quarter." Sam recognized Captain Riley Chen's voice, probably walking backward while he delivered his prepared statistics. Chen ran the motor pool with military precision, treating every repair request like a tactical operation. He'd hired Sam 6 months ago, based purely on her resume, 3 years' experience, excellent references, and a willingness to work the odd hours that kept the base running. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was where she'd really learned to fix things under pressure. What about contractor integration? A new voice, deeper and carrying the kind of authority that made even seasoned officers straighten their spines. "How do they mesh with military protocols?" "Seamlessly, sir. We maintain strict oversight while utilizing their specialized expertise." Sam finished the repair and began collecting her tools. The conversation was drifting closer, and she could feel the weight of scrutiny even though she hadn't looked up. Her skin prickled with the familiar sensation of being evaluated, measured, assessed for threats. The desert heat was becoming unbearable. Her gray workshirt clung to her back and perspiration stung her eyes. Without thinking, she rolled up her sleeves and reached up to wipe the sweat from her forehead. The conversation stopped. Sam felt the silence like a physical weight. She looked up to find herself staring at a tall man in dress blues, his graying hair perfectly groomed despite the heat. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulders, but it was his expression that made her stomach drop. He was staring at her right forearm with the intensity of someone who'd seen a ghost. "Where did you get that tattoo?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Sam's eyes dropped to her exposed arm, to the faded ink she'd kept hidden for 10 years. A broken-winged hawk wrapped around a series of numbers and letters that looked like random military designation to most people. But not to everyone. Not to General Malcolm Stroud. "It's nothing," Sam said quickly, rolling her sleeve back down. "Just old ink." But Stroud was already stepping closer, his entourage hanging back uncertainly. Captain Chen looked confused, glancing between his contractor and the general with growing alarm. "That's a Phantom Line Bravo designation," Stroud said quietly. "I've only seen that symbol in classified files. Files about people who died in Afghanistan 10 years ago." Sam's hands trembled as she latched her toolbox. "I think you're mistaken, sir. It's just a design I liked." "Look at me." The command carried the weight of absolute authority. Sam had no choice but to raise her eyes, and when she did, she saw recognition dawning in Stroud's face. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something with increasing urgency. "Captain Chen," Stroud said without taking his eyes off Sam. "I need you to detain this contractor for questioning." "Sir?" Chen's voice cracked slightly. "On what grounds?" "Possible identity fraud. Maybe worse." Stroud's fingers moved across his phone screen. "I'm calling military intelligence. This woman might not be who she claims to be." Sam felt the walls closing in. Around them, other contractors and military personnel had stopped working, drawn by the commotion. She was the center of attention now, exactly what she'd spent years avoiding. "General, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she began. "Have there been?" Stroud's eyes were cold now, calculating. "Because either you're wearing the tattoo of a dead woman, or Samira El-Amin isn't as dead as we thought." The name hit her like a sledgehammer. Sam's carefully constructed world began to crumble as she realized her decade of hiding was over. The general knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. "Report to the base administrative offices tomorrow morning at 0800, Stroud continued. "Bring identification, all of it. We're going to have a very long conversation about who you really are." Sam nodded numbly, not trusting her voice. She picked up her toolbox with hands that shook only slightly, old training keeping her movements controlled even as her mind raced through escape routes and contingency plans. As the general's convoy departed, Captain Chen approached her with a mixture of concern and suspicion. "El-Amin, what the hell was that about?" "I honestly don't know, sir. The lie came easily, practiced after years of reinvention. Maybe my tattoo looks like something else. People see what they want to see." But even as she said it, Sam knew it was over. Tomorrow, she would face questions she'd hoped never to answer again. Tonight, she had to figure out how to explain to Leo that their quiet life was about to explode. The drive home took forever. Sam's apartment was a modest 2-bedroom in a complex that catered to base contractors and junior enlisted personnel. Cheap, clean, and anonymous. Everything she'd needed to disappear. She sat in her truck for several minutes after parking, watching her 16-year-old son through the kitchen window as he worked on homework at their small dining table. Leo had her dark hair and serious expression, but his eyes held a brightness that hers had lost years ago. He was everything good she'd managed to salvage from the wreckage of her former life. Smart, curious, kind, and completely unaware that his mother had once been someone else entirely. She found him bent over calculus problems, his brow furrowed in concentration. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. "Interesting," Sam replied, moving to the refrigerator. "How was school?" "Rodriguez bombed the physics test. Carson got suspended for fighting, the usual drama." Leo glanced up as she opened a beer. "You look stressed. Bad day with the vehicles?" Sam studied her son's face, memorizing it. By tomorrow night, he might never look at her the same way again. "Just tired," she said. "Long day in the heat." But as she moved around their small kitchen, preparing dinner from whatever was in the refrigerator, Sam's mind was already racing ahead to the morning. To the questions she would face. To the secrets she'd buried that were clawing their way back to the surface. Outside, she noticed a car she didn't recognize parked across the street. The same model that had been at the base earlier. Security was already watching. Her quiet life as Sam El-Amin, civilian contractor, was over. Tomorrow she would have to become Samira again. The question was whether she could do it without destroying everything she'd built to protect the boys studying calculus at their kitchen table. The administrative building at Fort Valor stood like a concrete monument to military bureaucracy, its windows reflecting the early morning sun in harsh geometric patterns. Sam arrived at 0750, her stomach churning with the kind of anxiety she hadn't felt since Afghanistan. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the ceiling, while Leo snored peacefully in the next room. The security desk directed her to conference room C on the 3rd floor. As she climbed the stairs, Sam tried to prepare herself for what was coming. She'd rehearsed her story, crafted explanations that skirted the truth without being outright lies. But deep down, she knew that whatever was waiting for her behind that door would be thorough, professional, and probably inescapable. Major Lena Graves was not what Sam had expected. Tall and angular, with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into a precise bun, she possessed the kind of intimidating competence that came from years of getting answers from people who didn't want to give them. General Stroud sat beside her, studying a thick manila folder. "Ms. El-Amin," Major Graves said, gesturing to the chair across from them, "please, have a seat." The formality was deliberate. Sam recognized the technique. Keep the subject off balance with courtesy that barely concealed the steel beneath. She sat, placing her hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. "Let's start with basics," Graves continued, opening her own folder. "Full name? Samira El-Amin. Date of birth? March 15th, 1991. Social Security number?" Sam recited the number she'd been using for 6 years. Graves made notes, cross-referencing something in her file. Employment history? Various contractor positions. Vehicle maintenance, equipment repair. I have references if you need them. Graves looked up. "What about before 2019? There's a gap in your employment record going back almost 8 years. Here it was, the moment Sam had dreaded. "I was dealing with some personal issues, family problems. I wasn't working consistently. Family problems." Graves' tone was neutral, but her eyes were sharp. "Can you be more specific?" "My father was ill. I was helping care for him." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father had been ill, though he died when she was 12, but it was a story she'd practiced, one that would be difficult to verify and emotionally uncomfortable for investigators to push too hard. General Stroud spoke for the first time. "Miss El-Amin, I'm going to show you something, and I want you to tell me what you see." He slid a photograph across the table, black and white, slightly grainy, the kind of image that came from military surveillance equipment. It showed a group of soldiers in combat gear, standing beside a damaged communications array. Even in the poor quality image, Sam could make out the distinctive patch on their shoulders. Phantom Line Bravo. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. "Looks like military personnel. Overseas somewhere, maybe?" "Afghanistan, 2015, Stroud said. "This was taken during Operation Ember Rain. Do you recognize anyone in this photograph?" Sam studied the image more carefully, allowing herself to show the kind of curiosity a civilian might display. There, third from the left, was a younger version of herself. Thinner, harder-edged, with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much combat in too short a time. "No, sir. Should I?" Graves leaned forward. "We've run facial recognition software on this image. The computer identified a 94% probability match with your driver's license photo." The room fell silent. Sam could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of vehicles on the base. Everything hinged on her next words. "That's impossible," she said carefully. "I've never been to Afghanistan. I've never served in the military." "Haven't you?" Stroud's voice was quiet but intense. "Because according to our records, Sergeant Samira El-Amin was killed in action during Operation Ember Rain on October 12, 2015. Her body was never recovered due to hostile fire and structural collapse." Sam felt the world tilting around her. They knew. They had her records, her photograph, her supposed death certificate. The carefully constructed life she'd built was collapsing in real time. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she managed. "El-Amin isn't an uncommon name." Graves produced another document. "This is your tattoo, photographed yesterday." She placed it beside a military medical record. This is the same tattoo documented during Sergeant El-Amin's in-processing at Fort Bragg in 2014. Same design, same location, same distinctive scarring around the Hawk's left wing. The scarring. Sam had forgotten about the scarring, the result of shrapnel that had torn through her sleeve during a mortar attack outside Kandahar. It was like a fingerprint, unique and undeniable. "Ms. El-Amin," Stroud said, "I was the logistics commander for Operation Ember Rain. I signed off on the mission parameters. I reviewed the casualty reports. I attended the memorial service where we honored the dead from Phantom Line Bravo." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "So you can imagine my surprise when I see a dead woman fixing trucks on my base." Sam's mouth was dry. The walls of the conference room seemed to be closing in, and she could feel the familiar tightness in her chest that signaled an approaching panic attack. She fought it down with techniques learned in therapy sessions she could never admit to attending. "I need to call my lawyer," she said. "You're not under arrest," Graves replied, "yet, but we do need answers. If you are who we think you are, then there are serious questions about how you faked your death, why you assumed a false identity, and what you've been doing for the past 10 years. "I haven't assumed anything," Sam said. "I am who I say I am." But even as she said it, she knew the lie was unsustainable. They had too much evidence, too many connections. The only question now was how much they would uncover, and how badly it would damage Leo when the truth came out. Graves closed her folder. "We're going to need you to remain available for further questioning. Don't leave the local area without notifying us." "Am I free to go?" "For now." Stroud's expression was unreadable. "But Miss El-Amin, this isn't over. I've spent 10 years thinking I failed the soldiers under my command. If you're really Sergeant El-Amin, then I need to know what happened out there. I need to know why we were told you were dead." Sam stood on unsteady legs. As she walked toward the door, Graves called after her. "One more thing. Your son Leo, he's 16, correct? Attends Mesa High School?" The implied threat was crystal clear. Sam turned back, her maternal instincts overriding every other consideration. "Leave my son out of this." "That depends entirely on your level of cooperation," Graves said smoothly. "We'll be in touch." Sam left the building feeling like she'd been hollowed out. The morning sun was already brutal, promising another scorching day, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. As she drove home, she noticed the same unfamiliar car following at a discreet distance. They weren't even trying to hide their surveillance now. She was officially a person of interest, which meant Leo was too. When she arrived at the apartment, Leo was getting ready for school. He looked up as she entered, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "You're back early. How did the meeting go?" Sam forced a smile. "Fine. Just routine contractor stuff." But Leo knew her too well. His eyes narrowed slightly, picking up on her tension. "You sure? You look like someone just told you your truck was totaled." "I'm sure. Just tired." She moved to the coffee maker, needing something to do with her hands. "How's the physics project coming along?" "Almost finished. Mr. Peterson extended the deadline anyway, so I'm not stressed about it." Leo paused at the door. "Mom? Is everything okay? Really?" The question hung in the air between them. Sam wanted to tell him everything, to prepare him for what was coming. But she also wanted to protect him for as long as possible from the knowledge that his entire life had been built on a lie. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Have a good day at school." Leo hesitated for another moment, then nodded and left. Through the window, Sam watched him walk to the bus stop, his movement easy and confident. A kid who'd never had to look over his shoulder, never had to wonder if today was the day his past caught up with him. She envied him that innocence, even as she realized she was about to lose it forever. Major Lena Graves had spent 15 years tracking people who didn't want to be found. Drug dealers who'd skipped bail, deserters who'd faded into civilian life, terrorists who'd changed identities like changing clothes. But the woman sitting in her surveillance photos presented a different kind of puzzle entirely. Samira El-Amin had been officially dead for 10 years. Her service record showed an exemplary soldier, expert marksman, field engineering specialist, twice decorated for valor under fire. Then Operation Ember Rain. a mission so classified that even Graves had to request special clearance to access the files. The official report was stark in its brevity. Phantom Line Bravo had been tasked with maintaining communication infrastructure during a strategic withdrawal from a forward operating base near Kandahar. Taliban forces had overrun the position during a coordinated assault. Structural collapse from mortar fire had trapped several soldiers in the communications bunker. Sergeant El-Amin had been among the missing, presumed dead when rescue teams couldn't penetrate the debris. But now, sitting in her office at 2 a.m. with classified documents spread across her desk, Graves was finding inconsistencies that made her professionally suspicious mind itch. The first anomaly was in the casualty reports. 4 soldiers listed as KIA, 2 listed as MIA. But the field hospital logs showed 5 wounded evacuated from the area, including one listed as Jane Doe, unconscious, severe trauma, no identification recovered. Jane Doe had been transferred to a medical facility in Germany, then discharged 2 weeks later. The file indicated she'd walked out of the hospital against medical advice and disappeared into the civilian population. Graves cross-referenced the dates. Jane Doe had vanished exactly 3 days after Sergeant El-Amin's memorial service. The second anomaly was in the mission parameters themselves. According to the briefing documents, Phantom Line Bravo had been ordered to maintain essential communications during the withdrawal. But buried in the radio transcripts, Graves found something that made her blood run cold. Mayday, Mayday, this is Foxtrot Base. We have wounded, trapped in Section C. Requesting immediate assistance. The timestamp showed the distress call had come in at 0347 hours 13 minutes after the official withdrawal order. Standard protocol would have been to acknowledge the call and inform them that rescue was impossible due to hostile fire. Instead, the transcripts showed a different response. Foxtrot Base, this is Phoenix 7. I copy your mayday. I'm coming for you. Phoenix 7 had been Sergeant El-Amin's call sign. Graves leaned back in her chair, pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a picture she hadn't expected. According to the official report, El-Amin had died following orders, but the radio logs suggested she'd died disobeying them. Attempting a rescue mission she'd known was probably suicide. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The question was, if she'd died attempting that rescue, how was she now fixing trucks in Arizona? Graves pulled up the surveillance footage from the base hospital in Germany. The quality was poor. Security cameras from 2015 weren't built for facial recognition, but she could make out a figure leaving through the rear entrance at 0327 hours. The timestamp matched the Jane Doe discharge note exactly. Female, approximately 5 feet 6, wearing civilian clothes that looked too large for her frame. Moving carefully, favoring her left side. The gait was consistent with someone recovering from the kind of trauma described in Jane Doe's medical file. The woman paused at the exit, looking back toward the hospital. For just a moment, her face was visible to the camera. Even with the poor image quality, Graves could see enough to confirm what she was beginning to suspect. Jane Doe and Sergeant Samira El-Amin were the same person. The implications were staggering. If El-Amin had survived, why hadn't she reported to her command? Why fake her death and disappear into civilian life? Was she working for foreign intelligence? Had she sold classified information? Or was there something else? Something the official records weren't revealing. Graves reached for her secure phone to call General Stroud, then hesitated. It was nearly 3 a.m., and this was the kind of information that required careful handling. She made notes instead, documenting her findings in the meticulous detail that had made her reputation in military intelligence. As she worked, a memory surfaced from her own past. Her brother Marcus had been deployed to Afghanistan during the same period, serving with a different unit in the same region. He'd been wounded in action and medically retired with PTSD and a Bronze Star for helping rescue wounded soldiers under fire. She'd never asked him about the details. Marcus didn't talk about his service, and she'd respected his silence. But now she wondered if their deployments had overlapped, if he might have known something about Operation Ember Rain that wasn't in the official files. Graves locked the classified documents in her safe and drove home through the empty pre-dawn streets. Marcus lived in a small apartment near the VA Medical Center, surviving on disability payments and the occasional carpentry job when his hands were steady enough to handle tools. She found him awake, as she'd expected. He rarely slept more than a few hours at a time, another legacy of his service. He was sitting on his porch, smoking a cigarette and watching the sunrise. Lena. He didn't seem surprised to see her. Kind of early for a social call. Quote, "I need to ask you about Afghanistan." Marcus's expression closed off immediately. "I don't talk about that." "I know, but this is important. Official business." She sat down beside him on the weathered porch steps. "Do you remember Operation Ember Rain?" Marcus was quiet for so long that Graves thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Some things you don't forget, no matter how hard you try." "Were you there? During the withdrawal?" Another long pause. "I was attached to the QRF, Quick Reaction Force. We were supposed to provide backup if things went sideways." Marcus took a long drag on his cigarette. "They went sideways. The official report says there were no survivors from the communications bunker." "Official reports say a lot of things." Marcus flicked ash into the growing light. "Does it make them true?" Graves felt her pulse quicken. "What really happened out there, Marcus?" Her brother stood up, crushing the cigarette under his heel. For a moment, she thought he was going to walk away without answering. Instead, he turned back to her with an expression she'd never seen before. Part grief, part anger, part something that might have been hope. "There was a woman," he said quietly. "Combat engineer, crazy brave. When that distress call came in, she didn't hesitate. Grabbed a radio and headed straight into hell to get those boys out. Did she succeed? She got 3 of them out before the building came down. Saved my life, actually. I was one of the wounded they dragged from the rubble." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "Last I saw her, she was unconscious and bleeding. Medics said she wouldn't make it. But she did make it." Marcus looked at his sister sharply. "What makes you say that?" Graves chose her words carefully. "I think she might still be alive. I think she's been hiding for 10 years, and I need to understand why." "If she's alive," Marcus said slowly, "then she's got her reasons for staying hidden. That woman saved lives that night, Lena. Whatever else happened, whatever mistakes were made, she's a hero. Don't you forget that." As Graves drove back to base, her brother's words echoed in her mind. The official records painted a picture of a tragic military disaster. But the real story was more complex. A story of a soldier who'd chosen conscience over orders, who'd risked everything to save people she barely knew. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. Sergeant Samira El-Amin had violated orders, faked her death, and lived under false identity for a decade. By any legal standard, she was a deserter and a criminal. But she was also a hero who'd sacrificed her career, her identity, and her freedom to save lives. And somewhere in Mesa, Arizona, she was trying to figure out how to explain to her 16-year-old son that everything he knew about his mother was about to change. Meanwhile, Leo El-Amin was having problems of his own. He'd noticed the strange car parked across from their apartment complex for the past 2 days. His mother had been acting weird since her meeting at the base, distracted, jumpy, checking the locks on their door multiple times each night. Leo wasn't stupid. Something was going on. Something his mother didn't want to tell him. And if there was one thing he'd learned in 16 years of living with Sam El-Amin, it was that when she started keeping secrets, trouble usually followed. That afternoon, while his mother was at work, Leo decided to do some investigating of his own. He'd always been curious about their family history, but his mother had always been vague about her past. No grandparents, no extended family, no photos from before he was born. She claimed they'd lost everything in a house fire when he was a baby, but Leo had never been entirely convinced. He started in her bedroom, feeling guilty but determined. The dresser drawers held nothing unusual. Clothes, a few pieces of jewelry, some papers related to their lease and her work. But at the back of the bottom drawer, his fingers found something interesting. A small metal box, the kind used for storing important documents. It was locked, but Leo had learned basic lockpicking from YouTube videos during a brief phase when he'd considered a career in cybersecurity. The mechanism was simple, and within minutes he had it open. Inside was a military medal, bronze star with a V device indicating valor in combat. The accompanying citation was made out to Sergeant Samira El-Amin, United States Army. Leo's hands trembled as he read the citation. It described an action in Afghanistan where Sergeant El-Amin had displayed extraordinary heroism under enemy fire while attempting to rescue wounded soldiers from a collapsed communications facility. It was dated October 2015, 5 years before Leo's earliest memories of his mother. There were other items in the box: a set of military dog tags with his mother's name and service number, a photograph of her in Army combat uniform, looking younger and harder than the woman who made him breakfast every morning, and at the bottom, a folded piece of paper that made Leo's heart race. It was a death certificate for Sergeant Samira El-Amin, killed in action in Afghanistan on October 12, 2015. Leo sat on his mother's bed, staring at the documents spread before him. His mother was officially dead, had been dead for almost 10 years, which meant that the woman who'd raised him, who worked as a contractor to pay their bills, who helped him with homework and worried about his grades, that woman was living under a false identity. The question was why? What had happened in Afghanistan that had forced his mother to fake her death and disappear? And what did it mean for their life together now that someone had apparently figured out who she really was? Leo carefully returned everything to the box and put it back where he'd found it. But as he waited for his mother to come home from work, he couldn't stop thinking about the citation and what it revealed about the woman he thought he knew. His mother wasn't just Sam El-Amin, civilian contractor. She was Sergeant Samira El-Amin, decorated war hero. And if the strange cars and her recent behavior were any indication, her past was finally catching up with them both. General Stroud hadn't slept well in 3 days. The revelation that Sergeant Samira El-Amin might be alive had reopened wounds he'd thought were healed, brought back memories of a mission that had haunted him for a decade. He sat in his temporary office at Fort Valor, staring at a contact list he'd hoped never to use again. The surviving members of the Quick Reaction Force from Operation Ember Rain were scattered across the country now. Some had retired. Others had been medically discharged. A few had simply disappeared into civilian life. But there was one name on the list that might hold answers. Staff Sergeant Marcus Hill, Lena Graves' brother. Stroud had read Hill's file. Bronze Star for Valor. Purple Heart. Medical retirement due to PTSD and traumatic brain injury. The kind of soldier who'd given everything for his country and gotten broken dreams in return. Hill lived about an hour from the base, and according to his sister, he'd been there that night. The phone rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah? Sergeant Hill, this is General Malcolm Stroud. I'm calling about Operation Ember Rain." A long pause. "I don't talk about that." "I understand, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. We have reason to believe that Sergeant Samira El-Amin might still be alive." The silence stretched so long that Stroud thought the connection had been lost. When Hill finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, weighted with old grief. "Phoenix 7, that's impossible. I saw her go down with the building." "What if I told you she's been living in Arizona under the same name, working as a civilian contractor?" Another pause. "I'd say you better be damn sure before you go digging up ghosts, General. That woman saved my life." "That's why I need to talk to you. In person. Can you meet me?" Hill's address led Stroud to a modest apartment complex near the VA Medical Center. The man who answered the door looked older than his 43 years, his brown hair streaked with premature gray, his left hand missing the last 2 fingers. But his eyes were sharp, alert, the eyes of a soldier who'd learned to assess threats instinctively. "General." Hill stepped aside to let him in. "You want coffee? It's about the only thing I can still make without screwing up." The apartment was sparse, but clean. A few military photos on the mantel, some woodworking tools on a small table by the window. Hill moved carefully, favoring his left leg, and Stroud noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he poured coffee. "Lena says you've been asking questions about that night," Hill said without preamble, "about what really happened. The official reports don't match what I'm seeing now. If Sergeant El-Amin is alive, I need to understand how and why." Hill sat down across from him, cradling his coffee cup like it was anchoring him to the present. "You were logistics command for that operation, right? You signed off on the mission parameters?" "I did." "Then, you know we were supposed to maintain communications during the withdrawal. Simple job. Keep the radios working until the last unit pulled out, then fall back to the secondary position." Stroud nodded. "Standard protocol." Except nothing about that night was standard. Hill's voice grew distant, remembering. The Taliban hit us harder than intelligence had predicted. Mortars, RPGs, coordinated assault from 3 directions. We were taking heavy casualties, and the withdrawal was turning into a rout. Hill stood up, walking to the window. That's when the distress call came in. Section C of the forward operating base. They had wounded trapped in the communications bunker. Building had taken a direct hit, and they couldn't get out. The official report says the area was deemed too dangerous for rescue operations. It was too dangerous. Hill turned back to face him. Any sane person would have written those soldiers off. Acceptable losses in a tactical withdrawal. But Phoenix 7 wasn't any sane person. Stroud felt something cold settle in his stomach. What did she do? She grabbed her gear and a radio and headed straight into hell, said she wasn't leaving anyone behind. Hill's voice was thick with emotion. I tried to stop her, we all did. But you couldn't argue with El-Amin once she'd made up her mind. Did she reach them? She did more than reach them. She got 3 soldiers out of that bunker before the second mortar strike brought the whole building down. 3 men who would have died if she'd followed orders. Hill sat back down, his hands shaking more noticeably now. I was one of them. The revelation hit Stroud like a physical blow. You were in Section C? Trapped under debris with a punctured lung and a broken back. El-Amin crawled through a hole that wasn't much bigger than a storm drain to get to us. Had to make 3 trips. Could only carry 1 wounded soldier at a time. Hill's eyes were distant, lost in the memory. The building was coming apart around us. Every few minutes another section would collapse. But she kept going back, kept saying no one gets left behind like it was a prayer. What happened to her? She was pulling me out when the final strike hit. Pushed me clear and took the full impact herself. Last thing I remember was seeing her buried under about 2 tons of concrete and steel. Stroud felt the weight of 10 years' worth of guilt shifting in his chest. The medical records show you were unconscious when they pulled you out. For almost 6 hours. By the time I came around, they'd already declared the area too dangerous to search, told us El-Amin was dead, probably killed instantly. Hill met Stroud's eyes. I've been living with that for 10 years, General, knowing that woman died to save my worthless life. Marcus, the voice came from the doorway. Lena Graves stood there, her expression a mixture of professional composure and personal concern. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk. She entered the apartment, carrying a manila folder. General, I've finished reviewing the classified files from Operation Ember Rain. There's something you both need to see. Graves opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. Black and white surveillance images, grainy but clear enough to make out details. These were taken by a UAV monitoring the area after the strike. The timestamp shows 0427 hours, about 40 minutes after the building collapsed. The first photo showed the rubble pile where the communications bunker had been. The second showed movement, someone crawling out from under the debris. The third showed a figure limping away from the wreckage, carrying what appeared to be military equipment. Facial recognition is inconclusive, due to image quality and apparent injuries, Graves continued. But the height, build, and movement pattern are consistent with Sergeant El-Amin. Hill stared at the photos with an expression of wonder and disbelief. She made it out. It appears so, but here's what's interesting. There's no record of her reporting to any medical facility or command post. She just disappeared. Stroud studied the images, his mind racing through the implications. If she survived, why didn't she report for medical attention? Why didn't she contact her command? Because she knew what would happen, Hill said quietly. Court-martial for disobeying direct orders. Probably a dishonorable discharge. Everything she'd worked for, gone. But she saved lives, Stroud protested. Doesn't matter. Military justice isn't always about doing the right thing. It's about following orders. Hill's voice carried years of bitterness. El-Amin knew that. She also knew that if she disappeared, if everyone thought she was dead, then the focus would be on honoring her sacrifice instead of punishing her choices. Graves closed the folder. There's something else. The woman we've been questioning, Sam El-Amin, has a 16-year-old son. Birth certificate shows he was born in Germany in 2009, about 6 months after these events. The pieces clicked together in Stroud's mind. She was pregnant. It's the only explanation that makes sense. She survived the blast, made it to a medical facility, discovered she was pregnant, and decided that faking her death was the only way to protect her child from the consequences of her actions. Hill was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this new information. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "General, I don't know what kind of life she's built for herself and her son. But I know what kind of person she is. Whatever she's done, wherever she's been, she's earned the right to choose her own path." Stroud felt the weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders. The woman living quietly in Arizona wasn't just a contractor with a mysterious past. She was a hero who'd sacrificed everything to save lives and protect her unborn child. The question now was what the Army owed her in return. "I need to speak with her again," he said finally, "but this time it won't be an interrogation. It'll be a conversation between two soldiers who understand what it means to serve." The second meeting took place in a different room, smaller, less formal, with windows that actually opened to let in the desert air. Sam arrived to find General Stroud alone, no recording equipment visible, no files spread across the table. Just 2 chairs and a pot of coffee that smelled like it might actually be decent. "Miss El-Amin," Stroud said, standing as she entered. "Thank you for coming." Sam remained standing, her posture wary. "Am I under arrest?" "No, and you can leave any time you want. But I'm hoping you'll stay and let me tell you what we've learned." Something in his tone was different from their first encounter. Less accusatory, more respectful. Sam took the offered chair but remained ready to bolt. "We spoke with Sergeant Marcus Hill," Stroud began, pouring coffee for both of them. "He told us what really happened during Operation Ember Rain." Sam's hands tightened around the coffee cup. Marcus! She'd wondered for 10 years if he'd survived, if the sacrifice had been worth it. Is he? He's alive, wounded but alive. He wanted me to tell you that he's never forgotten what you did for him and the others. Tears threatened at the corners of Sam's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sergeant, we have UAV footage of you leaving the collapsed building. We have medical records showing a Jane Doe admitted to a German hospital with injuries consistent with your incident. We have witness testimony from the soldiers you saved." Stroud leaned forward. "I'm not here to arrest you or expose you. I'm here to apologize." The word hung in the air between them. Sam stared at the general, trying to process what she was hearing. "I was the logistics commander for that operation. I signed off on the withdrawal orders. When that distress call came in from Section C, I should have authorized a rescue mission instead of writing those soldiers off as acceptable losses." "You followed protocol," Sam said quietly. "A rescue mission would have violated standing orders about acceptable risk." "Maybe. But you didn't care about acceptable risk. You saw soldiers in trouble, and you acted. You saved 3 lives that night, Sergeant. 3 men who are alive today because you chose conscience over convenience." Sam felt something breaking open inside her chest, a wound she'd carried for 10 years without knowing it was still bleeding. "I disobeyed direct orders. I endangered the mission." "You fulfilled the mission, the real mission, bringing everyone home." Stroud's voice was quiet but intense. "The Army failed you that night, Sergeant. We failed to protect the soldiers you saved, and we failed to recognize your heroism. Instead, we made you choose between your career and your conscience. I made my choice. I've lived with the consequences." "Have you?" "Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been punishing yourself for 10 years for doing the right thing." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. She thought about the nights she'd lain awake, wondering if Marcus and the others had made it out alive. The guilt she'd carried about abandoning her unit, her duty, her oath, the fear that had kept her hiding in the shadows while her son grew up believing his mother was nobody special. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want to offer you something that should have happened 10 years ago. Recognition, honor, the chance to serve again with your head held high." Stroud pulled out a folder, not the thick investigative file from before, but something smaller, more formal. "The Army is prepared to reinstate you with full honors. Posthumous decorations will be converted to active awards. Your service record will reflect the truth about Operation Ember Rain." Sam stared at the documents. Everything she'd lost, everything she'd sacrificed, being offered back to her on official letterhead. "What's the catch?" "No catch. But there would be a ceremony. Media attention. Your story would become public knowledge. Stroud met her eyes. I understand that's not something you've wanted. Sam thought about Leo, about the quiet life they'd built together, about the questions that would come, the attention that would follow them wherever they went, about the boy who thought his mother was just a mechanic, and the man who would learn she was actually a decorated war hero. I need time to think about it. Of course, but Sergeant, your son already knows. Sam's head snapped up. What? He found your Bronze Star, the citation, your dog tags, your death certificate. Major Graves interviewed him yesterday as part of the background investigation. He's been waiting for you to tell him the truth. The world tilted around Sam. Leo knew. Had known and said nothing, waiting for her to trust him with the secret she'd carried alone for so long. How? How did he take it? Stroud smiled for the first time since she'd met him. He said, and I quote, "My mom's a badass, but I already knew that. She can fix anything." Despite everything, Sam felt a laugh escape her throat. That sounded exactly like something Leo would say. He also said he's tired of lying to his friends about why you don't have any family photos from before he was born. Apparently, he's been covering for you for years. Sam closed her eyes, feeling the weight of secrets she'd thought were protecting her son. Secrets he'd been protecting in return, understanding somehow that his mother needed the shelter of anonymity, even if he didn't understand why. General, if I accept this, if I come forward, what happens next? That's up to you, Sergeant. You've earned the right to choose your own path. We can make this as public or as private as you want. The important thing is that the record reflects the truth about what you did that night. Sam looked out the window at the desert landscape, thinking about the life she'd built in the shadows and the son who'd grown up believing his mother was ordinary. Leo deserved better than a mother who was afraid of her own past. He deserved to know that the woman who'd raised him was someone worth being proud of. Can I speak with Leo first, before any ceremonies or announcements? Of course. Sam stood up, feeling like she was stepping into a new version of herself, one that didn't have to hide anymore. General, thank you for coming after the truth instead of just accepting the convenient lie. Thank you, Sergeant, for reminding an old soldier what real courage looks like. The base chapel wasn't designed for media attention, but somehow they'd managed to fit 2 news cameras and a handful of carefully selected reporters into the small space. Sam stood in the anteroom, adjusting the dress blue uniform she hadn't worn in over a decade, her hands shaking slightly as she pinned on the insignia of rank she'd thought she'd lost forever. You look nervous, Leo said from behind her. Sam turned to find her son in a suit she'd never seen before, dark blue, perfectly fitted, making him look older than his 16 years. He'd gotten a haircut for the occasion, his usually unruly hair tamed into something approaching military neatness. I am nervous, she admitted. I spent 10 years trying to be invisible. This is the opposite of invisible. Leo stepped forward and straightened her collar with the precision of someone who'd watched her get ready for work 1,000 times. Mom, you know that time in 8th grade when I had to give a presentation about someone I admired? You talked about your robotics teacher, Mr. Patterson. I lied. Leo's voice was quiet but steady. I wanted to talk about you. About how you could fix anything, solve any problem, make everything okay no matter how bad things got. But I didn't know how to explain why I admired someone who seemed so determined to never be noticed. Sam felt tears threatening again. Leo, now I know. You weren't trying to be invisible because you weren't worth noticing. You were trying to be invisible because you'd already been noticed too much, by people who didn't understand what they were looking at. The chapel doors opened, and Captain Chen appeared. Ma'am, we're ready for you. Sam nodded, then turned back to her son. Are you sure about this? Once we walk through those doors, everything changes. People will know who we are, where we come from. They'll ask questions. Leo smiled, and in that smile, Sam saw the boy she'd raised and the man he was becoming. Mom, I've been ready for this my whole life. I just didn't know what I was getting ready for. The chapel was packed. Sam recognized some faces. General Stroud in the front row, Major Graves beside him, Captain Chen, and other base personnel scattered throughout the small crowd. But there were strangers, too, people whose presence spoke to the significance of what was happening. In the third row, she spotted a familiar figure, and nearly stopped walking. Marcus Hill, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable on his lean frame, his scarred hands folded in his lap. He met her eyes and nodded once, a gesture that carried 10 years of gratitude and understanding. General Stroud took the podium, his voice carrying easily through the small space. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to correct an injustice that has stood for 10 years. To honor a soldier whose heroism was buried beneath bureaucracy and whose sacrifice was hidden by circumstances beyond her control. Sam stood at attention, muscle memory taking over as Stroud began reading from the citation. The words washed over her, phrases about extraordinary heroism under enemy fire and conspicuous gallantry in the face of overwhelming odds. They were talking about her, about things she'd done, but it felt like hearing about someone else's life. Sergeant Samira El-Amin, Stroud continued, you are hereby awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States. Your actions on October 12, 2015, directly resulted in the preservation of 3 American lives and reflected the highest traditions of military service. The medal was heavier than Sam remembered, its ribbon bright against the blue of her uniform. As Stroud pinned it to her chest, she caught sight of Leo in the front row, his eyes bright with unshed tears and unmistakable pride. Additionally, Stroud said, you are awarded the Combat Action Badge in recognition of active engagement with enemy forces, and your service record is hereby amended to reflect full honorable service with no adverse actions. When the ceremony concluded, people approached her, some to shake hands, others to thank her for her service, a few to apologize for the years of silence, but it was Marcus who reached her first, his damaged hands gentle as he gripped her shoulders. I never got to say thank you, he said simply. You didn't need to. We were soldiers. We took care of each other. No, Marcus shook his head. We were supposed to take care of each other. You actually did it. As the crowd began to disperse, Sam found herself standing with Leo and General Stroud in the empty chapel. The cameras were gone, the reporters filing their stories, but the weight of what had happened remained. So what happens now? Leo asked. Stroud looked at Sam. That's up to your mother, son. She's earned the right to write her own orders. Sam looked around the chapel, thinking about the decade she'd spent hiding and the future that was now opening before them. For the first time in 10 years, she felt like she could breathe freely. Now, she said, we figure out how to live in the daylight. Quote, 3 weeks after the ceremony, Sam was back to her usual routine, arriving at the motor pool before dawn, coffee in hand, ready to tackle whatever mechanical problems the day would bring. The only difference was the way people looked at her now. Not with the casual indifference she'd grown accustomed to, but with a respect that made her slightly uncomfortable. Captain Chen approached her workspace, carrying a folder that looked distinctly official. El-Amin. Sorry, Sergeant El-Amin. Got a minute? Sam looked up from the transmission she was rebuilding. Still just Sam, Captain. The rank doesn't matter much when you're elbow deep in gear oil. Chen smiled. It matters more than you think. That's actually why I'm here. He set the folder on her workbench. General Stroud wants to see you. There's an opportunity he'd like to discuss. What kind of opportunity? The kind that doesn't involve spending your days under the hood of a Humvee. Sam wiped her hands on a rag, studying Chen's expression. Captain, I appreciate everything the Army has done to set the record straight, but I'm not looking to re-enlist. Leo's got 2 more years of high school, and I'm not ready to. Just hear him out, Chen interrupted. This isn't about re-enlisting. It's about something new. An hour later, Sam found herself in General Stroud's temporary office, along with 2 people she didn't recognize, a woman in Army Colonel's Eagles and a man in a civilian suit who had the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to making important decisions. Sergeant, thank you for coming, Stroud said. I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Martinez, Director of Army Corps of Engineers Emergency Response, and Dr. James Wright from the Department of Homeland Security. Sam shook hands with each of them, her wariness increasing. This felt bigger than a simple job offer. Sergeant El-Amin, Colonel Martinez began, we've been reviewing your service record, both the official version and the classified details about Operation Ember Rain. Your field engineering capabilities, combined with your demonstrated ability to operate under extreme pressure, make you uniquely qualified for a position we're looking to fill. Dr. Wright opened a briefcase and pulled out a tablet, showing Sam what appeared to be organizational charts and budget projections. We're developing a new rapid response unit for infrastructure disasters, both natural and man-made, bridge collapses, power grid failures, communications blackouts, and disaster zones. The kind of situations where military engineering expertise could save thousands of civilian lives. Sam studied the tablet, her mind automatically analyzing the logistics and resource requirements. This would be a military unit. Joint military-civilian, Martinez clarified. Think of it as the Army Corps of Engineers meets FEMA, with the authority to operate in both domestic and international disaster zones. You'd have the resources of the military, but the flexibility to work with civilian contractors and international aid organizations. And you want me to do what exactly? Lead it, Stroud said simply. Build the team, develop the protocols, train the personnel. Create something that could have prevented the kind of communication breakdown that happened during Ember Rain. Sam set the tablet down, feeling the weight of the offer. General, I appreciate the confidence, but I've been out of the game for 10 years. There are plenty of active duty officers with more recent experience. None of them have your combination of field experience and real-world problem-solving skills, Wright interrupted. We've reviewed the work you've done here at Fort Valor. In 6 months, you've improved vehicle readiness by 30% and reduced maintenance costs by almost 20%. That's not just mechanical skill, that's systems thinking. More importantly, Martinez added, you understand what it means to make life-or-death decisions when the official protocols don't cover the situation. That's exactly what this job would require. Sam thought about Leo, about the stability they'd built together. I have a son. He's got 2 years left in high school. The position would be based here in Arizona initially, Stroud said. We'd be establishing the training facility and headquarters right here at Fort Valor. Leo could finish school without any disruption. And after that? After that, you'd go where you're needed. Disaster zones, training facilities around the world, wherever your expertise could save lives. Wright leaned forward. Sergeant, the climate is changing, infrastructure is aging, and threats to civilian populations are evolving. We need people who can think outside the box when traditional solutions fail. Sam was quiet for a long moment, processing the offer. It was everything she'd never dared to hope for. A chance to use her skills, to serve again, to build something meaningful. But it was also a return to the world she'd left behind, with all the risks and uncertainties that entailed. Can I think about it? Of course, Stroud said. But there is one more thing. We've already identified a potential first mission for the unit. There's a situation developing at Fort Echo in New Mexico. Power grid failure, affecting both the base and the surrounding civilian community. Traditional repair crews are saying it could take weeks to restore full power. Colonel Martinez smiled. We think the right team could do it in days. If you're interested in a trial run. Sam felt her pulse quicken. A real mission, real problems to solve, real lives potentially at stake. It was exactly the kind of challenge she'd been missing without knowing it. If I were to accept, hypothetically, what kind of team would I be working with? Your choice, Wright said. Military personnel, civilian contractors, specialists, from whatever field you think you need. You'd have the authority to recruit whoever you want, train them however you see fit. Captain Chen has already volunteered, Stroud added. Says he's learned more about logistics in 6 months working with you than in 10 years of traditional Army training. Despite herself, Sam smiled. Chen was a good officer, and his willingness to join the team spoke well of the project's potential. When would you need an answer? Soon, Martinez said. The Fort Echo situation is deteriorating, and if we're going to test this concept, we need to move quickly. Sam stood up, her decision already forming in her mind. General, I'll give you an answer tomorrow, but I need to talk to Leo first. He's been part of every major decision I've made for the past 16 years. I'm not starting now. That evening, Sam and Leo sat on their small balcony, watching the sun set over the desert. She'd explained the offer, the opportunity, the risks. Leo had listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. So basically, he said finally, they want you to be a superhero. But like a realistic superhero who fixes things instead of punching bad guys. Sam laughed. That's one way to put it. And you're worried about how it'd affect me. Aren't you worried about how it'd affect you? Leo was quiet for a moment, watching a hawk circle in the distance. Mom, for 16 years I've watched you fix other people's problems. Broken cars, broken equipment, broken systems. You see something that's not working right, and you can't rest until you figure out how to make it better. It's just what I do. No, it's who you are. It's who you were in Afghanistan, and it's who you've been here. Leo turned to face her. The only difference is that now you don't have to hide it anymore. Sam felt something settle in her chest, a piece she hadn't known she was missing. You really think I should take it? I think you should do what makes you happy, and I think helping people makes you happy even when it's dangerous or difficult or complicated. What about your last 2 years of high school? What about college applications and prom and all the normal teenager stuff? Leo grinned. Mom, when have we ever been normal? Besides, how cool is it going to be when college interviewers ask about my family background and I get to tell them my mother leads an international disaster response unit? Sam reached over and ruffled his hair, feeling the last of her reservations dissolving. You know, when you put it like that. So you're going to take it? I'm going to take it. But Leo, this means our quiet life is officially over. There will be attention, scrutiny, probably some level of danger. Are you sure you're ready for that? Leo stood up, offering his hand to help her up from her chair. Mom, I've been ready for this my whole life. I was just waiting for you to catch up. As they headed inside, Sam felt like she was stepping into a future she'd never allowed herself to imagine. Tomorrow, she would accept the offer and begin building something new. But tonight, she was simply a mother and son, ready to face whatever came next together. The power grid at Fort Echo had been down for 36 hours when Sam and her hastily assembled team arrived in New Mexico. Captain Chen rode in the passenger seat of their equipment truck, reviewing damage reports on his tablet while Sam navigated the desert highway. Main transformer station took a lightning strike during the storm, Chen reported. Secondary systems cascaded offline when the automatic switches failed. Base is running on emergency generators, but the surrounding civilian community is completely dark. Sam nodded, her mind already working through potential solutions. Behind them, a convoy of trucks carried the specialized equipment they'd requisitioned. Portable generators, switching gear, communications equipment, and enough cable to rewire half the state if necessary. ETA to Fort Echo? 20 minutes. Colonel Martinez is already on site coordinating with local emergency management. As they crested a hill, Sam could see the base spread out below them, a cluster of buildings connected by roads that should have been lit but weren't. In the distance, the civilian town was equally dark, a void in the desert landscape that represented thousands of people without power, water pumps, or air conditioning in 100-degree heat. The scene at the transformer station was worse than the reports had indicated. The main switching facility looked like it had been hit by an artillery shell. Twisted metal, scorched concrete, and the acrid smell of burned electronics hanging in the air. Jesus, Chen whispered. Sam studied the damage, her engineer's mind cataloging the problems. We need to bypass the main switching station entirely. Run temporary lines from the secondary substations and create a new distribution point. That's not how the system was designed to work. No, but it's how it's going to work until we can rebuild the permanent infrastructure. Sam turned to the rest of her team, a mix of Army engineers, civilian contractors, and electrical specialists she'd recruited from across 3 states. Chen, I need you coordinating with the local power company. Get me schematics of every substation within 50 miles. Rodriguez, start setting up our command post. I want communications with both the base and the civilian emergency management. For the next 6 hours, Sam lost herself in the familiar rhythm of crisis management. Problems arose, solutions were found, obstacles were overcome through a combination of technical knowledge and creative improvisation. It was exactly the kind of challenge she'd been born to handle. Then the flashback hit. It started with the sound, a generator backfiring, the sharp crack echoing off the concrete walls of the substation. Suddenly, Sam wasn't in New Mexico anymore. She was back in Afghanistan, listening to mortar rounds falling around the communications bunker, while she tried to get wounded soldiers to safety. Her hands began to shake, her vision narrowed to a tunnel, the voices of her team faded into background noise as the sound of her own heartbeat thundered in her ears. Sergeant? Chen's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Sergeant El-Amin? Sam couldn't answer, couldn't move. The panic attack had her completely in its grip, 10 years of suppressed trauma overwhelming her carefully maintained composure. She was dimly aware of Chen guiding her to a chair, of concerned voices asking if she was okay. The radio crackled to life. "Phoenix 7, this is home base. How's it going out there?" Leo's voice. Somehow, impossibly, her 16-year-old son was on the radio net, calling her by the call sign she'd used in Afghanistan. Chen must have given him access to the communications system back at Fort Valor. "Mom?" Leo's voice was gentle but clear. "I know you can hear me. Remember what you always tell me when I'm stressed about a test. One problem at a time. One solution at a time." Sam focused on her son's voice, using it as an anchor to pull herself back to the present. Leo continued talking, his words steady and calming. "You've got this, Mom. You always figure out how to fix things. These people are counting on you, just like those soldiers counted on you 10 years ago. You didn't let them down then, and you won't let these people down now." Gradually, Sam's breathing returned to normal. Her vision cleared. The sounds of the work site came back into focus. Generators humming, equipment being moved, her team working to solve the problems she'd given them. "I'm here," she said into the radio. "Thanks for the reminder. Always, Phoenix 7. Now go save the day." Sam stood up, feeling Chen's supportive hand on her shoulder. Her team was watching her with concern but not judgment. They'd all been in situations where the pressure became overwhelming. "Sorry about that," she said. "Where are we on the bypass installation?" 40% complete, Rodriguez reported. "Should have partial power restored within 2 hours." Sam nodded, her confidence returning. "Good. Let's finish this." 3 hours later, the lights came back on across Fort Echo and the surrounding community. As Sam watched the town emerge from darkness, she felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced since Afghanistan. This was what she was meant to do: solve impossible problems and bring hope to people when systems failed. 6 months later, Sam stood before a classroom of 30 young engineers, military and civilian, who would form the next generation of rapid response specialists. The training facility at Fort Valor had been transformed into a state-of-the-art center for disaster response education, complete with simulation labs and field training areas. "Crisis engineering isn't about having all the answers," Sam told her students. "It's about asking the right questions when everything is falling apart. When the textbook solutions don't work, when the equipment you need doesn't exist, when lives depend on your ability to improvise, that's when you find out what kind of engineer you really are." Captain Chen, now promoted to major and serving as Sam's deputy, watched from the back of the classroom. The El-Amin Protocol Training Initiative had become one of the most sought-after programs in the military, with a waiting list that stretched for months. After class, Sam found Leo in her office, surrounded by college acceptance letters and scholarship offers. At 17, he'd grown into a thoughtful young man whose understanding of complex systems rivaled that of graduate students. "MIT wants you," Sam said, looking over his shoulder at the stack of letters. "So does Stanford, Caltech, and about 6 other places," Leo grinned. Apparently, having a mother who leads an international disaster response unit looks good on college applications. "What did I tell you?" "You told me it would be an adventure. You were right." Leo's expression grew more serious. "Mom, I've been thinking about my major. I want to study disaster response engineering, follow in your footsteps, sort of." Sam felt her heart swell with pride and concern in equal measure. "Leo, you don't have to." "I want to, not because I think I have to live up to your legacy, but because I want to build my own. You taught me that fixing things matters. I want to help fix bigger things." That evening, Sam received a call that brought her life full circle. Major Lena Graves, now heading a Pentagon initiative to track and support former service members dealing with PTSD, had news about Marcus Hill. "He's doing well," Graves reported. "Got a job with a veteran-owned construction company. Says working with his hands helps with the nightmares. He wanted me to tell you that he's been following news about your program. He's proud of what you've built." "How about you, Lena? Any regrets about the investigation?" "None. Finding the truth about Operation Ember Rain changed how we handle missing personnel cases. Your story has helped dozens of other soldiers who fell through the cracks." Quote. After hanging up, Sam walked out onto her balcony, a larger one now, in the house she'd bought with her new salary. The desert sky was brilliant with stars, and she could see the lights of Fort Valor in the distance. Tomorrow, she would deploy to Indonesia to help coordinate disaster response after a major earthquake. It would be her first international mission since returning to service. Leo found her there, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Nervous about tomorrow? A little. It's been a long time since I worked overseas. You'll be fine. You always are. Leo handed her a coffee and stood beside her. Mom, thank you. For what? For showing me that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing what needs to be done, even when you are afraid. Sam looked at her son, no longer a boy trying to protect his mother's secrets, but a young man ready to make his own mark on the world. I love you, Leo. I love you too, Phoenix 7. The memorial wall at Arlington National Cemetery stretched longer than Sam remembered, black granite reflecting the faces of visitors who came to remember the fallen. She found the panel she was looking for and ran her fingers over 3 names, the soldiers from Section C who hadn't made it out of the communications bunker before the building collapsed. Sergeant Miller, Specialist Johnson, Private First Class Davis, she read aloud. I'm sorry it took me so long to come here. She pulled out a small metal object, her original dog tags from Operation Ember Rain, the ones she'd hidden away when she faked her death. Carefully, she placed them at the base of the memorial beside a small American flag someone else had left. I kept my promise, she said quietly. I brought everyone home who could be brought home. The rest of us, we made it too, in our own way. Behind her, she heard familiar footsteps. General Stroud approached, older now but still carrying himself with military bearing. He'd retired from active duty but continued to serve on the board overseeing the El-Amin protocol programs. I thought I might find you here, he said. Needed to make peace with some ghosts before heading overseas. Sam touched the memorial wall one more time. It's strange. For 10 years I felt like I was the one who died in that bunker. Now I know better. The woman who died there was someone who thought she had to choose between duty and conscience. The woman who walked away understood that sometimes they're the same thing. Quote, any second thoughts about the international posting? Sam smiled. None. Leo settled at MIT. Marcus is building furniture and sleeping through the night. Lena is changing how the Army takes care of its people. My work here is done. Time to go where I'm needed. Stroud handed her an envelope. Your deployment orders. Welcome back to the world, Sergeant El-Amin. As they walked away from the memorial, Sam felt lighter than she had in years. The ghosts of Afghanistan were finally at rest, not because she'd forgotten them, but because she'd honored them through a life lived in service to others. Her phone buzzed with a text from Leo. Saw the news about your deployment. Proud of you, Mom. Go save the world. Another text, this one from Marcus. Heard you're heading to Indonesia. That's our Phoenix 7, always flying toward the fire. Stay safe. And a final message from Chen. Teams ready for deployment. Looking forward to working under your command again, Sergeant. Sam looked up at the sky, where a commercial airliner was leaving a contrail against the blue. Tomorrow, she would be on a similar plane, heading toward another crisis. Another chance to bring order to chaos and hope to despair. But for now, she was simply a woman who had found her way home to herself. The broken-winged hawk tattooed on her arm had finally learned to fly again. And this time, she wouldn't need to hide her wings. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.